Good evening, folks. Here we are. Welcome in. Hope you're doing well out there. My name is Mijo Biscan, if you don't know me. If you do know me, hello again. So tonight we've got a pretty special sort of, live stream, presentation. I don't really know what to call this exactly, but it's really gathering together to talk about, it's for music lovers and artists to get together, talk about what's wrong, what's wrong with this world, that they don't understand that music is amazing, and that we sort of need to support it if we want it to be in the world. And so tonight's session is going to be, it's going to be looking at, what the problems are, but also the solutions. And this is video number 1 out of 3 that we're going to do. I'm going to do another live stream next Monday and Thursday, same time. Gav is in the house. I know, Gav, there is too much wrong in the music industry. We could be here for like 7 hours, but I'm actually going to keep it pretty tight tonight. I reckon about 30 minutes of sort of going through some stuff and chatting, and would love to hear from you in the chat as we go along. Any thoughts that pop up, just throw them in the chat, because the other part of this is that I do want it to be a conversation. So without further ado, I think I'm just going to get into the presentation. It's going to sort of say everything that I, want to say anyway. So let's do it. Look at this cool fancy setup I got going on. So the idea of tonight and the video series is talking about the vanishing value of music, exactly how streaming, major labels, social media has stripped the soul out of music that we love, and how we can create a future that sings again. And I'll explain all of that more as we go through. So this is sort of what we'll cover today. What is music? What's it for? Who's it for? Where did it come from? The role of artists, audience, industry, past mistakes and challenges of the recording industry, the current state of music, future vision for everyone to get more of what they want with less of the bad stuff. And then a Q&A. If you have questions as we go along, just drop them in the chat. And then at the end, I'm happy to answer anything that you have on your mind. And then we might even have some live music. I am considering even us writing some music together about what we're about to talk about, or we'll do it in the next session. So that's the idea. If you don't know me, my name is Mijo Biscan. I've released 3 albums, 3 EPs. I'm releasing my 4th album at the moment. I've been playing music for 23 years. Toured Australia and Europe. I've toured with Gautier, Missy Higgins, Claire Bowditch, Tommy Emmanuel, Lior, and others. I'm a full-time gigging musician, and I do about 47 million other things, like run live streams like this. All right, so before we start, there definitely is a caveat that I need to put in place. This is about being a music lover first and craving a healthy creative culture. I think that's really what's at the basis of why I'm doing this, why I'm sort of motivated and inspired to do this, is because I really care about the culture, the music culture, creative culture. And I just think if we don't pay attention to it, it just gets worse and worse. That's been my sort of experience. The next thing is that I'm going to be evaluating and pointing out the problems that we have. And as I do this, there is a risk of sounding very whingy or complaining. But I assure you, I'm not complaining. I'm just diagnosing the problem. And it's really important to do that if we're going to talk about solutions, is really, let's articulate the problem so that we can come up with a really good solution. So I'm going to go pretty deep into that, but I don't want us to disappear into pessimism. It's really, if you know me at all, you'll know I'm not a pessimistic person whatsoever. And then there's discussion and Q&A. And like I said, would love to hear from you. So to get started, let's go back in time, all the way back in time. So in more tribal times, musicians played important roles in the culture and social life of their communities. Music was often used for a variety of purposes, including ceremonial purposes, entertainment, communication, healing, storytelling. Music has played such an important role in our evolution as a species, and that's why it's so deep in us. People have said that as human beings we could actually sing before we could talk. It was like a way that we communicated. So it's very, very deep. This is an Indigenous Australian idea that the wisest person of the tribe is the one who knows many songs, and that's because the songs would hold all the important information of the tribe. Music's been an important part of the human existence for eons, really, and it is fundamental to who we are. So what I want to do is, in explaining all this, is to understand that it has a very deep value in our lives. That's why we respond to it in such strong ways, and it's worth thinking about and protecting. Then in more modern musical times, I'm not going to go through all this, but music has become sort of, in a way, more complex, maybe. That's not even really the right term, but I guess it's just evolved and developed over time. And then last century, everything changed in the dynamic of music, because everything prior to that time was about everyone participating in actually creating music, or there was an audience and performers, but they were sort of in it together. They were doing this thing together. You really couldn't have one without the other, and it was really important. Then once recorded music came into being, that really changed, because then an industry sprung up around that. So a lot of money was able to be generated selling the experience of music to music enthusiasts. So this is where I'm going to pull out my trusty pen. I'm going to try and draw this idea. And I would say this is one of the main ideas that I've been thinking about lately when it comes to music and the modern music industry and all of that. So I call it the tricky trio. Let's see if we can make this work. All right. So here we go. So the trio kind of works like this. So there, like I mentioned, you always had the musician for a long time, and you had, I'm going to write music lover, because that's the term that I like the most. Musician and music lover, and they could just interact. There was this free flow back and forth, and this is really where culture sort of happened. That's sort of the value of culture. Once recorded music came into being, the culture kind of went away. But here, this is where you had the industry. So the music industry popped up around that. And what the industry tried to do was connect musician with music lover. But what they ended up doing was driving this huge wedge between the musician and the music lover. So for the musician to connect with the music lover, they had to go all the way up here through the industry, and then there was distribution and things like that, and then it came over to the music lover. So, and the only way to get over this was like this ladder of money. So the musician, or here it was musical notes into dollar notes. And that's how the music lover could go up there and access the music, was through this dynamic. So, I'm just going to leave that there, actually. But what has happened in recent years with the internet and all of that is we actually have had this opportunity to basically not necessarily get rid of that wedge, because it's still there, and I'll explain more about that later. But the internet is like this pipeline. It's like this little pipe that goes under that wedge, and it connects the musician with these musical notes going in here, and it can get to the music lover's ear. This is meant to be a little ear. And then they can send some money back through here. And then you can have this free flow of music and a compensation for that music, the value of that music. The only real thing that's in the way here that I've noticed is something like transaction fees, or someone's platform like Patreon or whatever it might be. And so what I have aimed to do is use this pipeline as much as possible and even remove as much of this as I can. So it's as pure as it can be back and forth between the musician and the music lover. And I'll explain more of that later as well. But this is the idea, is to sort of circumvent the industry. So we don't really need the industry as much as we used to, but they still like to get their hands into everything. So if there are any questions or comments about that, I'd love to hear them. So, all right. Otherwise, I'm going to move on here. But keep this idea in mind, because I think this is kind of the most important. Everything else I'm going to talk about is sort of reinforcing this idea or giving you really specific examples as to why it's not that useful to go the industry route. Okay, so that sounds good. So what's the problem? So it depends on what you're trying to create when it comes to music. Are you trying to make dollars out of music, or are you trying to build culture, or are you trying to build, a bit of both of those? Are you trying to build expression and deep experiences, or money and fame? Are you considering ethical treatment of all the people in the supply chain? So that's the musician, that's the music lover as well. I feel like music lovers are actually getting a raw deal in many ways. But it's everyone else. There's so many people involved in creating music, writing music, producing music, engineering music, mixing music, mastering music. All those people have amazing skills to bring music to the world. And, we need to think about everyone as part of that. Are we trying to make the culture healthier and more valuable for everyone? Are we trying to exploit the artists? I don't know. Is that a good idea? Are we trying to hack the taste of music lovers? Which is definitely a thing that's happening. So here's a couple of quick examples of the industry exploiting musicians. And I'll just go through this quickly. But here's this dude called Mozart. And despite being recognized as one of the greatest composers of all time, Mozart struggled financially throughout much of his career and was often forced to take on commissions from wealthy patrons in order to make ends meet. He was also subject to restrictive contracts with publishers, which limited his ability to profit from his compositions. So you think this is a person who's kind of has moved creativity in the culture and music almost more than anyone over the last few hundred years, and still struggled to make it work because of restrictive contracts with publishers. Here's another one. So Robert Johnson was paid very little for his work. He did not receive any royalties for his recordings. Also experienced restrictive contracts, only allowed to record for one record company, and he was not permitted to record under his own name or to perform live shows. How crazy is that? That he couldn't profit just from going out and playing music. He was completely controlled. And then this is quite a famous case, but Prince went through many challenges with record labels and constantly felt like he was being told what to do and didn't have free expression. So Prince later explained his decision and told a group of journalists at Paisley Park, which is his recording studio, that record contracts are just like, I'm going to say the word slavery. I would tell any young artist, don't sign. So there are a couple of epic examples, and they're just, in researching this, they are just a small fraction of the many examples I could give. I wanted to mention this bit. So now let's talk about major labels and record deals and how they work for artists. And I don't know if this is getting a bit too detailed, but the reason I brought this up is because I think most people just think, well, if you want to be a musician, just get a record deal, and that label will help you become like big, famous, and definitely really rich. So I wanted to let people know this. 5% of all artists that are actually signed, only 5% ever recoup the recording costs and make any money. Meaning 95% of all acts signed never break even. And I don't know what you would have guessed, but I would have guessed that of all the people that are signed, I don't know, 50 to 70% of them would at least make a living or do pretty well out of it. But it's really like 5 out of 100 acts actually break even. Doesn't mean that they make lots of money, just means that they're no longer in debt to the record company. So that's each year around 600 artists are signed by major labels. 30 bands break even or make a bit more. You probably hear of one of them, or you might hear of one of them every 2 to 3 years, which is a pretty bad strike rate, really. So out of those 600 artists, 270 bands make no money. They have albums shelved, means they made the album, but the record company is not going to put the money in to release it. But they're still caught up in the record contract, means that they can't get out of it, they can't sign to another label, and they can't release their own music. And the label, and they owe the label money. So one way that works is that a record deal is not just money that the artist is given. It's essentially a loan from the label, and then you have to pay that off by selling records. And if you don't sell enough records, you now are in debt to the label, and yeah, you're just stuck basically. So you also lose creative control. You lose control of how you interact with fans. They own your music catalog 100%. They own the publishing rights. They can do whatever they want with your music. They can put it on ads that you would never approve of. And there's no artist development anymore. Record labels basically wait till someone's kind of blowing up, and then they sort of swoop in and convince this, usually a very young person, that they're going to help them. So this is sort of an example of how a record deal would work. Like I mentioned, it's not a payment, it's a loan. The artist is expected to pay it back. The artist royalty is between 10 and 20%. So for every dollar the album makes, 20 cents goes towards paying down the debt of the record deal. It doesn't go to the artist until the debt is paid off. So only after they paid back their unrecouped balance does any money hit their account. Let's say a label gives an artist $1 million advance. They spend $250,000 on a record. The rest on marketing, music videos, catering, accommodation, transport, a few parties, a few cool new outfits. The artist has an unrecouped balance of $1 million. With a royalty rate of 20%, their album has to earn $5 million before they break even. That would be the equivalent of 1 billion streams to break even. And that's really very rare. To have 1 billion streams or something is, I don't know, that might happen just once a year as well, something like that. And then there's something called 360-degree deals, which I won't go into, but essentially the record label then also owns all of your touring, all of your merch, all of your appearance fees. Basically 360, they own everything, that any income that comes in is part of that thing of paying the label back. So that's pretty crazy, right? And I know that can sound like it's getting pretty dark, but I think it's really important for people to know this information, because I think there are just a lot of myths and misconceptions around the music industry and what it is, and what the solutions might be. Yes, exactly, Gav. So there's a pretty deep dive into how all of that works. But then, ta-da! That was all in the past. But let's talk about the current situation. Digital streaming, the new modern age of music. It's a whole new world. It's totally different. Everyone's free to make music and distribute it globally and make income. And all the gatekeepers are gone. So the most interesting music rises to the top. They'll recommend new music that you've never heard of. That's what we all kind of thought with digital music and Spotify and playlists and social media. But unfortunately, more bad news. So through streaming, platforms keep 30% of the revenue from streaming. 15% goes to what's known as the publisher, who represent the songwriters, while the record label, if someone's signed to a label, gets 55% of that. And then they pay a percentage to the artist after they've paid back that label investment. The world's 4 big labels are responsible for 80% of content available on Spotify, which is pretty wild. So that's their entire back catalogs, essentially, all their legacy artists and everything. And also any new artists that they sign. So they essentially make up almost 90% of all of Spotify. The top 100 songs on Spotify are mostly always all from major label artists. So there aren't that many, indie artists that are breaking through just because they're really great. And it's quite controlled. So if you want to know more about this and how Spotify and the label sort of got in bed with each other, I highly recommend watching a documentary on Netflix called The Playlist. It's amazing because even as a musician, I don't know everything that's happening in the music industry. And I watched that and it really, really shifted how I think about the music industry. So I recommend it. All right. So streaming platforms, how's Spotify doing? So Spotify made $18.8 billion in 2022. Pretty good. 21% increase. The founder, Daniel Ek, is worth $4.6 billion. His co-founder is worth $6 billion. So they're doing awesome. How cool is that? And so you'd expect with all that cash, their artists must be flush with cash. They must be just spreading that around, saying, look, we've made all this money really on the back of all these creative people. Let's give some of that money back. Yeah, well, let's see. So this is just some more information on that. So it's so great that the money Daniel Ek made from the creative efforts of musicians is being reinvested into supporting their careers and developing them as artists to improve the overall health of creative culture. Oh, hang on. That's not what's going on. Daniel Ek will invest over $1 billion in European moonshots. It's basically technology companies. And then it gets even worse than that. Spotify CEO announces a $100 million investment in AI defense technology. So you can see this tweet over here. Enough is enough. Using our content to fund war is the final straw. So there became this kind of big movement called Boycott Spotify that has really been going on for quite a while now. Just a bit more kind of information on that. And then as far as the revenue from streaming goes, this is kind of how it breaks down. A stream is basically worth around 0.006 to 8, sometimes 0.003. So it's like half a cent, roughly like half a cent per stream. There are 8 million artists on Spotify. 80% of them have less than 50 monthly listeners. 80% of the songs have less than 5,000 plays. So that's about, almost $16, which is not enough to cover the distribution that you have to pay to get onto Spotify. And if you get 10,000 streams, you make about $30, which is about the cost of what an album used to be. And if you have a runaway hit and get 1 million streams, you make about bit over $3,000, which maybe it's like $5,000 Australian. But that's got to be a pretty decent song, and I mean it's got to be a pretty popular song, and that artist has spent way more than that just producing the song and promoting the song. So, and there's a caveat here, like the music has to be good. I'm not saying that every person who uploads something onto Spotify should get 10 grand in their bank account. I understand it's a marketplace, and if you're not writing pop hits, you're probably not going to do great. And it's similar to, what it would have been on the radio, back in the day. So, and just a reminder that 87% of music on Spotify is from major label artists. So they really crowd the field, and most of that money is going to them. So here we go. So Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Yeah, but that's all in the past, right? Let's talk about the current situation, digital streaming. So basically the old record business and the modern record business is essentially the same. It's the same dynamic. There's just a different distribution channel. So it used to be they have to press vinyl, CDs, tapes, and now the distribution is online, but it's still all owned by these massive companies, and they really decide what gets on the playlists. And here's a bit of a secret that I think almost nobody knows about, which is Spotify also has its own artists. So it will hire musicians to basically make like stock recordings, or like recordings that you would make for YouTube users to use on their video, like royalty-free music or whatever. And they just give them a genre like jogging, I don't know, hopping playlist. And that artist that Spotify has paid, they will go make songs for that playlist, and then Spotify will put those songs on that playlist, will feature those songs predominantly. It might have some other songs on there as well. So when that's getting millions of streams, they don't have to pay out any money to any other artist that's not already on their books, which is a type of payola that when I found this out recently, it kind of made me sick. I think it's absolutely disgusting that they're doing that. So this just reinforces that the game is basically rigged. Take a breath. Okay, take a breath. So, yes, I think Gav is right. I think the pay rate that per stream has gone down even since I sort of did this research. It's pretty crazy. It's sort of like, the people that either are in the industry, they're trying to just maximize how much money they can make while just continuing to pay the people who actually create the work less and less and less. So it's pretty wild. So now for something completely different. I always dreamed of seeing the future. So I'm going to briefly talk about the future of music and talk about that tunnel that goes under that wedge. And this is just going to be a little summary, and then in the next session that we do, which is next Monday at 7 p.m, I'm going to flesh this out a lot more. So we've gotten through the most sort of icky parts of this story, and the rest is going to be hopeful. So Back to the Future also happens to be one of my favorite movies of all time. So now that was pretty epic, but maybe upsetting, maybe a bit deflating. But where there's challenge, there's opportunity. So this is really where my optimism and my natural character sort of gets to speak out. So the word crisis in Japanese has two symbols. One stands for danger, and the other one stands for opportunity. So that's what a crisis represents. And I think we are in a crisis with what's happening in the music industry, as I've just been outlining. But that means there's also going to be opportunity here for things to change, for us to do things differently, for us to do things in a way that's more fair, that's actually better than what it was in the past. And I think that avenue is also open to us if we want to go move down that pathway. And Gav, who's here, he knows about this, and many of us have thought about this for a while. But one thing that came up in doing the survey recently was people didn't really have an answer for what they would do if they could wave a magic wand. It seems like an intractable problem, but there are lots of things we can do. And I think it's kind of incumbent upon people like me or musicians or other people in the industry to actually really sketch out a positive possible vision and future that we all want to be a part of, and that feels possible and that feels exciting and feels like it's going to be better. So, future vision. So there's doom and gloom. There's also vast opportunity to make art, music, culture vastly better than ever. And here are some reasons why. We have the technology to connect, like what we're doing in this very second. This is crazy. I couldn't have done this in the 80s. I basically have like a mini, TV studio that I get to just, present to you. Recording music and sharing it with a community of passionate music lovers is cheaper, easier, more immediate, deeper, richer than ever before. So you actually can have more access to, musicians and music that you love. You can connect with those people, which is also amazing. I couldn't do that with Eddie Vedder in the 90s when I just was in love with Pearl Jam. I was like, I wish I could just tell him I think he's awesome. But now if you love an artist, you can go on their social media and say, I love you. I think you're awesome. Thank you so much. That's a beautiful thing. So most music lovers are starved for authenticity in this day and age, and they can get access to real artists if they want to. Musicians need true music lovers and have the ability to connect without any middlemen, industry exploiters, or others feeding off the creative output of the artist. That's also an amazing thing to acknowledge and lean into. Musicians and music lovers can work directly together. So something we do in the Backstage Pass is we write songs together. And maybe we'll do that in the next session. And that's also a beautiful thing. And there's like this back and forth that happens where music lovers can let me know, what they're into, what they'd like more of, that sort of thing. And that, I can think about what things I want to create that serves those people who love it. We can promote more niche, meaningful, authentic, genuine, culture improving music and connect that to people who want that as well. There are many new models popping up of directly supporting artists, subscribing, crowdfunding in return for unique, deeply enriching musical experiences for fans of music and culture. And someone sent me something today that was really interesting about someone who was signed to a major label and is realizing they have to go in a different direction. And I'm going to share that video in the next session when we're talking about sort of fleshing out the vision for all of this. So that's basically the end of this presentation of all of this stuff. So I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Anything that's popped up in your mind, any comments you want to make, any questions you have for me, anything that was missing in that you want to ask me about if you want to know more. What's frustrated you about the music industry in the past or present? What kind of connection would you love to see or have with your favorite musicians? What stood out, surprised you, got you thinking in today's session? If you have any questions, just let me know in the chat. And just to let you know, at this point, next session is Monday the 27th of May. And then the one after that will be, let me look at the calendar. It'll be Thursday the 30th of May, also 7 p.m. Melbourne time. So let me know. Let me know what you're thinking. And thanks for listening and being a part of this and deciding that you're interested in knowing sort of the latest. There literally is so much more that I've discovered in my research recently, and I have been thinking about writing a book about all of this. But I mainly actually want to focus on the positive aspect. I just think it's important to outline what the problem is, but I want to also outline what the opportunity is, and that's what I'll do in the next session. So if you have any comments, questions, love to hear from you. So what do we have here? We've got Gav. You know, the lower plays now have the rate reduced. Anything under 1,000 plays, basically you get zip. Yeah, exactly. Couldn't think of a suitable answer at the time. There is something there, just not clear what it is. I do that with quite a few artists here and overseas. Darren Hayes was more or less paid to leave Sony. Oh, wow. I don't know that story. That'd be very interesting to know more about that. I do know some stories of Australian artists that people would probably know, but I actually don't feel comfortable talking about their their deals. But I do know of, I'll just say, I know of a very, very well-known Australian band that had a huge hit, and they went over to the US as well, and then they signed a deal. They went to make their second record, and they still had not recouped the money from their first record because the record company had spent so much money, you know, sending them to the US and all this stuff, trying to promote them, I suppose, but dug such a deep hole. And even though if I told you what the song is, you would be like, oh my God, I know that song. And everyone knows that song. And they went to make a second record, and it just didn't really go anywhere. I don't even know if it got released. And then they were stuck in that record contract for a while. The main singer got out of it. She started a new project, but that sort of didn't really take off. So there's a lot of sort of sad stories of artists being taken advantage of. But again, the future is hopeful, and we do have the power to vote with our money. You know, if we want to see things change, normally we have to sort of vote with our feet, vote with our money, and make it really clear what we do value, because, you know, that's what the industry ultimately cares about, is what music lovers are going to actually spend money on. So, very interesting, Gav. Didn't know that. Awesome. So, Gav, if you have any questions, anyone else who's here, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. Otherwise, we might leave it there. I'll give you a minute, and while I'm waiting, I'll just let you know about the next session. I have been sort of mentioning what it's about. I'm going to sketch out what is a really inspiring, uplifting vision for what independent musicians and music lovers can do, who really care about culture and who really value it. And I think that's ultimately really exciting. And I think in the next stream, we'll write a song about it. And the people who are live on the stream will get a copy of that single sent to them. If you're not on the stream, you won't get it. So good idea to attend live. And that's going to be fun. So there's a little preview of the next session. To go with other artists like yourself who actually take time to get to know their fans. Yeah, cool, Gav. Yeah, I've loved being able to get to know, you know, the people who are into my music. I love connecting with those people. They're usually like-minded in many ways, and they're really passionate about music, and that's who I want to spend time with anyway. And, you know, I've thought about, you know, I would rather, you know, run with 1,000 amazing music lover fans than to try and drag along 1 million lame people who don't care about music, who are just sort of consuming it like it's just air. They're just like, and don't really care about it. So I would much rather spend my time with, you know, a couple of thousand amazing music lovers. That's a dream, you know. That's an amazing, beautiful thing. So awesome. So if there are no questions, there is a question here, Gav. I'll have to think about it, but maybe like a week or two later. Oh, yeah. We'll figure something out. Awesome. Big love. Thanks, everyone. Catch you next time. And I will catch you on Monday at 7 p.m. Big love. Peace out. Bye.